Here is a fast motor that I'm rebuilding for a client as part of a stack rebuild. Look at this, the motor itself looks fine. However, if you take a look at the end plane of the shaft, and wiggle this back and forth, you can see there's a fair bit of movement here. It's more than 1/8 of an inch, which is definitely a warning sign that there is problems on the inside, and you can kind of get an effect of that by plugging it in. And notice that when the motor is running, I don't know if you can hear that or not, as a upper stack motor it would sound alright. As a lower stack motor, it's a bit noisy, depending exactly on its orientation. And that tells me that there's rubbing going on that shouldn't be going on with the rotor, and where the little steel washers on that meet the bearings on the inside. So I'm going to take this apart. Oh, before I do that, let me show you one more thing with this motor. See how the shaft is sticking out there? That's pushed as far as it'll go that way. If I push it this way, it comes out and shoots back in that direction there. So you can see it's not centered in the arm, in the stator rather. So I can't push it any more on that at all, even though I have a lot of play in the end there. So the magnetic forces in here are pushing this that way, and that is going to increase the wear, especially as it's already going to be, well, actually it's not so bad. In this case, it would normally be sitting like that. Oh no, it'd be sitting, yeah, it'd be sitting like that if it was a lower motor. Not sure this is going to be a lower or an upper. I'll know that in a few minutes. When they're rebuilt, they're suitable for use either way. Now I have removed the bolts. I have deburred the shafts on the motor, and I'm going to open it up and see exactly what I find on the inside here. Oh, I've also removed the split ring. A little bit tricky doing this with only one hand. Hang on. This has to come off with no resistance whatsoever. So, as I was saying before my phone ran out of memory, it's really important that these shafts are deburred so that they can go through those bearings with no resistance whatsoever, because you don't want to inadvertently score the oilite surfaces. So, as I suspected, when I opened that end up there, that's the flatted side, I found some of the fabric washers around the shaft there are damaged and torn. The felt is not torn, but it's badly worn, and it's a little bit bigger than the shaft now, so it'll flop around. And the steels were in decent shape on that side. One of them was actually kind of impaled really hard on the phenolic spacer. I'm going to have a close look at that when I put it back together again, make sure the tolerances are still good on the inside diameter. And if they're not perfect, they get replaced. Same thing at this end here. Now I'm going to take it apart. And you can see by the kind of greasy mess on the inside here, this motor was probably oiled a lot at some point. Probably trying to make it not as noisy as it is. So I can feel the steel's got pretty decent tolerances there on the shaft. Pull it off. That's interesting. There we go. These ones just fell apart on me. They're the, that's a plastic one there. And that feels to me like plastic that has been damaged by oil. So plastics are not necessarily mineral oil resistant. And this washer, oh, that's a felt, believe it or not, what's left of it. So plastics are not necessarily mineral oil resistant. You're not supposed to get oil all the way down this part of the shaft here, although it's a good idea to have a few drops within the felt when you reassemble it. The oil is supposed to go in the felt that is under this cover here. And if I have to take another one of these apart, maybe I'll show you. There's a felt ring around here. You can see when you look through here. That's what you're supposed to be lubricating. And the felt travels, or the oil travels from the felt, through the oilite bearing, which is porous, to the outside of the bearing, where it lubricates the shaft. And it's possible, I don't know for sure, but it's possible that this failure was actually precipitated by using either the wrong oil or too much oil. So I'm going to clean this up and rebuild it and have it correctly aligned within the magnetic field, and this motor should work quite a bit better. Another quick note while I'm here, there should not be any oil on this piece. Okay, it's supposed to float about 5 thou away from the corresponding parts of the stator, and it's floating essentially on a magnetic field cushion when it's spinning. We don't need, nor do we want, oil in there. Here's something else that's kind of interesting. When I pull this off of the shaft, so this is the steel that's right above the phenolic spacer. That's all that's left of it. Look at that. These are supposed to be identical. So this one here is very badly worn, and it's been worn, it must have gotten pinched and prevented from rotating somehow or something, I'm not really sure, probably by virtue of the stack of spacers, and it was probably getting pushed really hard, this one against the bearing, and then these ones against each other, to give like a little stack of stuff that's not spinning, and this one was probably spinning. And that's what's caused the wear there. So in cases like this too, that you can sometimes find, especially in slow motors, actually wear cut right into the shaft. Not a big deal. This is really far from the bearing surface. The bearing surface is up here, so I can rebuild all the stuff that goes between here and the bearing, and it'll be fine. And sure enough, there's the groove that I was suspecting would exist. It's worn right into the shaft there. I can actually catch it with my fingernail. And that is from it wearing away the inside of that pour washer, right above where the phenolic spacer goes. Now this is also pretty interesting. Where I pulled off one of the phenolic spacers, where there had been a steel washer that felt like it was jammed really hard and stuck against it, and I suspected it was chewing into it, and I was right. You can let me get the focus right here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but the very edge of that has a ridge in it now that it's not supposed to. I don't know if you can compare both sides or not. Anyway, this little tiny remnant of a steel washer was actually firmly embedded within that hunk of phenolic. So again, this is another sign of extreme wear that happened on the inside of that particular motor. This might be part of that steel washer where the outside and the inside disconnected from one another. or it might all be all that's left of another washer entirely. And this is my first pass at reassembly. I've got new wool felt washers in there, new steel washers, and new Nylotron washers. I obviously haven't measured this for spacing yet, but I think it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not. That bearing is lubricated, and that's assembled properly. I should actually be able to spin it just like that with very little resistance. No grindy noises or anything like that, because it's all nice and clean and freshly lubed. Okay, so now we have a reassembled motor. The end play on the shaft is not 0, but it's less than 1/8 of an inch. When you're doing the reassembly on these, make sure that you get the right end bell on the right end of the shaft, so that you got the power wire coming out the right way. And also you want to make sure that you get the orientation of the other, I guess motor cap, or whatever you want to call it, right, so that it's not interchangeable. There's 4 ways to put it on, and there's only one way that's right. And you have to get the slow motor hanging from the right screws the right way, otherwise it'll be misclocked and you'll have some reliability issues. So I ended up pulling a couple of the washers out because they actually went together too tight. It's a little bit loose right now, but it's not completely assembled either. And when you turn the motor on, now you can see the shaft jumps that way and it retracts back, so it's not centered exactly within the stator right now. So I'm going to add, we're actually going to add a washer to this side, because that will keep the shaft moving a bit more that way. Then I'm going to rinse, lather, repeat until I've got the alignment where I want it when the motor is assembled. And finally we have a quiet running motor with good tolerances, and while it does have some play in the shaft, there's about the same amount of force pushing it in either direction while it's running, and I'm not seeing it jump even after pulling or pushing during reassembly, which tells me that it's decently well centered. The rotor is decently centered within the stator now. So this one, I can finish putting it together now. It's already got all 4 screws on. That's how I know the tolerances are right, and I can ship this back to the customer.